Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, November 18th. We have a big show for you, a wild weekend in college football yet again. Tennessee falls to Georgia. We'll go over winners and losers. Also in the NFL, the New York Giants have officially made a quarterback change. We'll talk about what happened with Daniel Jones, why they ended up making the change, and who they have to replace him, as well as our college football top 25 later on in the show, and a Monday night preview. Before we get into any of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, November 19th. But like I was saying, in this segment, we are going to start off our show in the NFL. The Giants have officially made a change at quarterback. Daniel Jones, no longer the starting quarterback after 6 years. He and an extension, one playoff win, one playoff season. The experiment is done, as people are calling it. Daniel Jones officially out as the quarterback for the New York Giants, and this was something that we all saw coming. This was something that had, plenty of footprints leading back a couple of years. Obviously, when the Giants went and extended him, it was a contract full of controversy, right? You give Daniel Jones, a guy that historically has not been that great of a quarterback, $40 million contract. At the time, I was a big public defender of it, or I still am a big defender of that contract. I understand maybe you don't want Daniel Jones there, but coming off of a playoff win where he looked really good, some bright spots with a new head coach where he had just played his best season, I understand extending him. The question is the money. And when it comes down to Daniel Jones, what I thought Joe Schoen, the GM of the Giants, did an excellent job with is making it so that the contract had an early out. It was a 4-year contract, but really it was a 2-year contract. They had an out after 2 years, which is what we're seeing. After this year, they barely owe him any money. They front-loaded it so that they could get out at this point if, for whatever reason, it didn't work out. And as we've seen, it didn't work out. Daniel Jones has been one of the worst quarterbacks in the league this year, coming back from an ACL injury that made him miss most of the season last year. Has not been a great performance for him. The Giants only won 2 games, currently hold a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. In most other years, they would have a top 3 or maybe even the worst with the way they're playing. They're coming off of a loss across the pond in Germany against the Panthers, one of the worst teams in the NFL. And now we're taking a look at this team and the state it's in. And really, when you just take a look at this roster, I've been saying this for a while now when we do our power rankings, whenever we really talk about the Giants in general, that front four is really good, led by Dexter Lawrence, who is a defensive player of the year candidate, second in the league in sacks, or top 3 at this point. This is a guy in Dexter Lawrence who is just a game changer, a game wrecker. Next to him, you have a bunch of insane pass rushers. Brian Burns, they trade the Carolina Panthers a lot for him and give him a big contract extension. They drafted Kayvon Thibodeau. They still have Azeez Ojulari to come and fill in for injuries. This is a really good Giants front four. Besides that, they have a lot of work to do on the defensive side, but still, on the offense, you have some talent, especially young talent. Andrew Thomas, one of the best offensive tackles in the league. He just got paid. You have Tyrone Tracy, who in limited action as the starter has really shown up. He's only had 1 game as the starter where he's been under 100 total yards. This is a guy, 5th round pick out of Purdue this year, that's already making huge waves around the NFL, as well as Malik Neighbors, the 1st round pick this year, showing that he can be an elite receiver. A lot of the problems with this team, and you can say there are a lot of problems with this team, but you can also take a look at it and objectively say, this isn't a roster without hope. You get a competent quarterback in there. This is a team that instead of being 2-8 right now, they're a team that you look at and you say, maybe they're 5-5. Maybe they're even 6-4. You take a look at one-score games, and right now, if you reverse all the outcomes of one-score games, the Giants would be 6-4. So this is a team that is close. It's just not there. And Daniel Jones clearly was not the answer. I'm not going to sit here and defend Daniel Jones anymore. But the more interesting thing to come out of this is the fact that Daniel Jones not being replaced by Drew Lock, being replaced by Tommy DeVito. And I think, honestly, that is the right decision. I've talked a lot about this when we talked about this quarterbacks being moved on. We covered this a little bit last week when the possibility was floated out there, but now that it's made official, I'm glad that they made this choice, right? Tommy DeVito is a guy that was one of the most accurate quarterbacks in the league last year. He showed up, won a couple games, and this is exactly the kind of spark that they need. He's not going to go out and do something crazy, but he's also not going to lose a game for you. This is a situation where you bring in the best possible quarterback, and that by no means was Drew Lock. Drew Lock is the kind of quarterback that you turn to in a spot start situation. He's not a long-term starter. He's a guy that's going to stick around the league as a backup, and he did a fine job in Seattle in that role. He did a fine job when we were taking a look at when Geno went down, leading some really good drives. Well, he showed up in the first game of that preseason and looked worse than Daniel Jones. Those two guys from the same draft class are pretty much identical in my eyes. Tommy DeVito, I think, is slightly better than both of them at this point, and I think the Giants coaching staff made the right decision. I know that's going to have a little bit of backlash, and I know that was the part of this move that had people the most confused. But the main reason they're deciding to make this move right now is not because they really think Tommy DeVito is that much better. It's because they're much like Russell Wilson last year when the Broncos ended up benching him at about this point. There is an injury guarantee written into his contract. $23 million written into Daniel Jones's contract, having him, if he gets hurt, all that money becomes guaranteed. Now, this is, as I talked about his contract a little bit earlier, a sign that he's gone after this season. The Giants are going to cut him. They're going to move on. He's probably going to get a post-June 1 designation. Then is only going to be $11 million against the cap. So not really that bad. If it's a pre-June 1 designation, it's $22 million against the cap, but it's still not the whole $41 million cap hit if they do decide to keep him around for the next couple of seasons. This is, again, just really good contract work, really good, keep your quarterback around because you kind of have to after winning a football game. I will praise Joe Schoen for this. I know people are going to give him a lot of flack after what happened this offseason with Saquon Barkley and the whole situation of him choosing Daniel Jones over Saquon Barkley. But I do want to give him credit where credit's due. He knew this was a possibility, and he built this into the contract. An out year after 2 years. I'm very happy with that move. He's gone. Daniel Jones is gone. Tommy DeVito in at quarterback. Taking a look at what is this going to do for the Giants as far as the rest of the season? It's probably not going to do much. He went on a little bit of a run last year when he came in, won 3 games in a row, but coming off the bye, they're playing the Buccaneers, who are expected to get Mike Evans back. That's going to be a huge get for them, and he should have a huge day if he is out there. Then the Cowboys, who the Giants just can't seem to beat despite how bad they are on Thursday night. The Saints, kind of stumbling right now. The Ravens, the Falcons, the Colts, the Eagles. That is not a super easy schedule down the stretch. Maybe you pencil them in for 2 wins, maybe 3 if a couple of the bounces go the right way, but this is not a team that's going to get more than 5 or maybe even 6 wins if everything goes right. When we take a look at this Giants team, this is not a team that you're optimistic for. This is just a team that needs to get to the end of the season. This is a team that needs to get to the end of the end of this year so they can see where they are, draft a quarterback. There's plenty of quarterbacks in this draft class that I think would be very helpful. A guy like Shadir Sanders, a guy like Cam Ward, guys like Dylan Gabriel, stuff like that are really leading playoff caliber teams in the college football world right now. But we'll talk about the college football world in a second, coming up next. But again, Giants make a change at quarterback. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I think it's about time they did it. They obviously did it to save money, but probably a good move on their part. Let me know what you think. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention to the college football world. Winners and losers from a wild weekend of college football coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't need shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows or 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't replaced all this my sound. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the news it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh, I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, November 18th. If you were just tuning in, we just went over Daniel Jones, his benching by the New York Giants, the former 6th overall pick in the draft, now benched for the presumably rest of his career. He should get another opportunity somewhere else as a backup, I think. In this segment, we turn our attention to college football. Another week, another crazy Saturday with plenty of playoff implications, teams eliminated, and much more. We'll talk about the winners of a wild Week 12 coming up in just a second. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, November 18th. But like I was saying, in this segment, we are going to get into the college football world. As we do every Monday, heavy college football focus. We're going to start off with the winners. Every single week, 5 winners, 5 losers. Here are our top 5 winners of the week. It was a big week for the Heisman race, a big week for some playoff contenders, and a big week for some teams trying to make the bowl. And we're going to start right there. A team in Kansas that has been one of, if not the hottest teams in all of college football. The way that they've played the last couple of weeks, Kansas beating up on an Iowa State team, beating up on Iowa State last week, now taking care of BYU in the fashion that they did, winning off of a pooch punt. I've never seen that happen before. A quarterback punt, perfectly executed, probably not entirely on purpose, hits off of BYU's player's helmet. They get 30 yards and a first down and goal off of that pooch punt. Perfectly executed by Jalen Daniels. He is really coming into his own. The problem with Kansas all season long has been their turnovers. They've cut down on that a lot, especially in the last couple weeks. They need to win out to be bowl eligible, but you see why this team was ranked at the beginning of the season. The Big 12 is crazy, and Kansas might continue to knock off some of these top teams. They've now taken out BYU this week. BYU no longer undefeated thanks to Kansas. Kansas is on a rampage. They've almost eliminated Iowa State. They're still alive for a Big 12 title. Long shot there, but they're still alive. BYU, now if you look at the AP poll, actually is not even a top 4 seed. BYU would be number 12, and Boise State would be the 4th seed with a bye because of this loss to Kansas. Kansas is on a roll. They're our number 5 winner this week, and this is just a very fun team to watch. They're very dangerous, and I see no reason why they can't finish this season out. I know they got a tough schedule coming up, but still, should be fun. Our number 4 winner of the week, we're giving it to a Group of 5 program here that's been on quite the roll, arguably the best Group of 5 program. It's Tulane. I know that Boise and Ashton Genty are the number 1 Group of 5 team. In fact, we have a Group of 5 power ranking top 5 coming up when we end up doing our NCAA top 25 later on in the show, and you'll see where I have these ranked. But Tulane getting a 45-0 win over a Navy squad that, at least offensively, is really hard to shut down. They've gone through their skids a little bit. They obviously started off as one of the last undefeated teams. Now we take a look at where Navy is. They've lost 3 of their last 4 games. They just get shut out by Tulane, and Tulane, with that win, has clinched a spot in the American. Now, this is a outlandish proposal, but it is not at all impossible for 2 Group of 5 schools to get in. With the way that the Big 12 is playing itself, I wouldn't be shocked if somehow, say, Colorado loses a game to Kansas later on this season, and then Colorado ends up winning the Big 12 auto bid. Maybe there's a chance that they don't even get in. Maybe there's 2 Group of 5 schools that get in this season, and that possibility is looking more and more likely with the way that Tulane is playing. Tulane is the number 4 winner of the week. Number 3 winner of the week, that is going to go to Georgia. Georgia had another one of their big tests. Georgia, after feeling disrespected, that was the conversation all week. The first team out, the Georgia Bulldogs at number 12. The big controversy over that, they had something to say. They host Tennessee in Athens. They end up taking care of business, winning by 14 points. A huge win for Georgia against a really talented SEC team in Tennessee. The SEC is going through it right now. They're cannibalizing each other, and you can see it represented in the rankings. I know we don't have the college football rankings up, but last week, 4 of the top 5 were from the Big 10. I don't expect that to change. I don't expect the top 5 to change much. We take a look at the AP poll, it's still the same. The SEC still has 4 schools in there, but they're all hanging out at the bottom. They're all barely holding on. Georgia gets a huge win this week, probably solidifies themselves in the playoffs, but we don't know what's going to happen. They like I've been saying all season, they're the 1 3-loss team that I think could even get in, aside from a conference champion. We'll see what happens, though. Georgia is the 3rd winner of the week. And number 2 and number 1, we're going to combine together. Number 2, I put Ashton Jeanty. He, once again, is just insane. Ashton Jeanty is on a Heisman case. He's on a roll with Boise State. Another 3 touchdowns, another 130-plus yard performance. He has been held to... He is yet to be held under 130 yards this entire season. That is ridiculous. He's broken all the records for Boise State right now. And he is in that Heisman conversation for real, for a reason. Like, we take a look at what Boise State is doing. It's a lot on the back of Ashton Jeanty. I see people disrespecting him. Oh, he gets 50 carries a game. That's why he's doing this. Who cares how many carries a game he gets? You go back to some of these great running backs. They get 50 carries a game. He's also still averaging against 8-man boxes, 9-man boxes. He's putting up these numbers. Over 130 yards in every single game. And people are saying he's out because he only runs for 130 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's ridiculous. Ashton Jeanty is the number 2 winner. He solidifies his case as at least the runner-up in the Heisman with as long as he continues these performances. And that leads us to number 1. Like I said, they kind of get combined for me. My number 1 winner of the week, it's Travis Hunter. Hits the Heisman pose, much like Ashton Jeanty does. Rushes for a touchdown, has an interception. They're giving him a lot of credit for that interception. His teammate made an amazing play, and he was just there to gather it up. It was a great play by both of them, but still, he didn't have his greatest day receiving, but what he's able to do at all levels of the field on impact, his impact on offense and defense is insane. He gave up his first touchdown of the season, just one all season, as a guy that plays the entire game. He doesn't stop. His motor is insane. Travis Hunter is the number 1 winner of the week. The way that he plays football is just a joy to watch. Travis Hunter has made himself the Heisman favorite, and I'm very glad that this year it's not going to go to a quarterback. Or I would be very mad, I should say, if it went to a quarterback this year. You have a battle between one of the best running back performances, single season performances that has ever been put on a college football field, and an athlete in Travis Hunter who's playing 90% of his over 90% of his team's snaps, being incredibly effective on both offense and defense. Highlight reel catches, insane defender. This is the battle between them two. And if it goes to anyone else, I'm quite honestly going to be very angry. They're my number 1 and number 2 winners of the week. It's a lot of fun to watch college football this year. Lots and lots of playoff implications coming up this week. But before we get into that, we have a quick break. Coming up next, we have our Week 12 losers. 5 losers. We just went through 5 winners: Kansas, Tulane, Georgia, Ashton Genty, and Travis Hunter. We've got our 5 losers coming up next. Make sure you stick around for that here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, November 18th. We have a lot. If you're just tuning in, we just finished going over the winners from last week of college football. In this segment, we turn our attention to the other side of things. We just went over the biggest winners. Now we take a look at the biggest losers in this segment. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, November 18th. But like I was saying, we have our top 5 losers coming up. At number 5, I have another crazy weekend in college football. We have a team that eliminated themselves, a team that needed to win out, already had a bit of a tough time getting in without that conference championship game, but a team that got themselves eliminated in Washington State. Washington State has been hanging around in our top 25 for a while. They got all the way up to number 22, I believe. That was last week, their highest ranking. They've been hanging around near the bottom. They've been a team that has been dominating just about anybody else. Their one loss this season had come against Boise State, a very close loss to Boise State, but a team that's been dominating just about anybody else. Washington State had New Mexico this week, and it looked like they were going to win. They end up blowing a big fourth quarter lead, losing to New Mexico, and all but obliterating their chances of making the college football playoffs. It already was going to be a tough road for them, and what makes them one of the top 5 losers is because they needed to win out, and even if so, they probably would not have made it, if I'm being honest, but now they actually have no chance. I still see the AP poll has them ranked. I think at this point, the college football playoff poll should not, because I don't think they have a chance to get in, and it should only be consisted of the top 25 teams with a chance to get in, at least in my opinion. That's how I think they should do it. Washington State, the 5th biggest loser of the week. At number 4, we have the Big 12. We kind of talked a little bit about it when we talked about Tulane, but the reason I have the Big 12 as a loser this week is not because just BYU went down. It's not because Kansas is on a roll. It's not because Arizona State took out Kansas State and all but eliminated them from anything but an auto bid. It's because all of 4 of their contenders, Kansas State, Colorado, Arizona State, BYU, all 4 of them have their flaws. They've all gone through the punches, and they've all played each other, beaten each other up, and they've made it so that only one of them is going to get it. It's not going to be a 2-bid league, And that's just how it goes sometimes. Sometimes that's just how you just have to roll with the punches. And the Big 12 has kind of punched themselves out of a too bid league. I think they are they're a kind of league that has a lot of talent. I think it's kind of going a little bit swept under the rug, if I'm being honest. This Arizona State team is awesome. They're just now starting to get their respect. I think I would be shocked if they weren't ranked this week. They should have been ranked last week. You have a team in Colorado that I think is getting a little bit disrespected. Their one loss coming very close to a Kansas State team that's been up there for a while. Kansas State takes a tough loss. I still think they'll find a way to stick in the rankings. Again, Arizona State is a very good football team. And BYU loses their first game of the season in a kind of gimmicky way to Kansas. They still are the number 1 seed by the AP poll. That's all we have to go off of as of today. So they're still presumed to win that Big 12 and get that playoff spot, but the Big 12 is in danger of not even getting a single bid. If the American continues to play like they are with both Tulane and Army, if both of those teams win out and then say Tulane ends up winning after Army gets a massive win over Notre Dame, maybe there's 2 Group of 5 schools in and nobody from the Big 12. That would be insane, but honestly, the way you look at it now, it's not even that hard to imagine. I think that's the chaos scenario that's most likely to happen, and the Big 12 might be the odd ones out right now, and that sucks for them. They've got they have a lot of really good teams in that conference. Kind of going along those same lines, sticking in the Big 12 for our number 3 loser of the week, we have Kansas State. They get absolutely destroyed at home to an Arizona State team that needed that win badly. Kansas State now only has a tiebreaker over Colorado. They basically they need a lot of help to get in. They were looking at a chance to make that Big 12 title game. Now their hopes are gone. They play a little bit too sloppy, a little bit too inconsistent, and it seems to bite them every couple of weeks, where they seem to grind out a win at the end, but it's not happening this week. Kansas State, third biggest loser. At number 2, we go to LSU. They've now lost 2 straight games, one to Alabama in brutal fashion, and now they lose one more, this time to Florida. DJ Lagway is awesome. That is a really good Florida team, and they're starting to all put it together. It's great news that they ended up keeping Billy Napier. He's going to start to build something as long as he keeps his guys through this year in the transfer portal. Some receivers are coming in to help them in the passing game. That defense is playing really good. They're flying around the football, but LSU now has lost 2 straight. And somehow they're still alive in the SEC. But if they had won this game, they had a very easy path to at least the SEC title game. They win that game, they just need to win out, and then they're in. Instead, they lose. They need help to get in. They're all but eliminated at this point. LSU barely holding on to playoff hopes. They're our number 2 loser of the week. And number 1, it goes to BYU. BYU was ranked in the top 10. They were the number 5 team in the nation for me. They lose to a red-hot Kansas team. And like I said, it really hurts not just them, but the Big 12 as a whole. This list is filled with Big 12 teams that took a tough loss this week. BYU, not only are they no longer undefeated, their magical season done, but now in the AP poll at least, and again, it's not the official rankings, but it's all I have to compare right now, they've dropped to 14. They are now that 5th conference champion. They're still in the playoffs, but they have a tough road ahead. They still have to play a couple more tough teams, and they still need to win out. This is not a guaranteed playoff spot anymore for them, and I'm not so convinced that they make it. That was a brutal loss for them. Their offense looked the worst it's been all season. They weren't able to get anything done against a Kansas team, like I said, is red hot right now. BYU, the biggest loser of the week. But let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Who was the biggest winner? Who was the biggest loser? We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention to our very own college football top 25. We got a Group of 5 top 5 as well, and we'll take a look at what at least my playoff picture would stand right now. But excuse me. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC. to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, November 18th. If you were just tuning in, we just went over the winners and losers from this week's college football. Very eventful, lots of craziness going down. In this segment, we turn our attention to the top 25, a brand new rankings hot off the press for week 13. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, November 18th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into our college football top 25, starting off with our group of 5 top 5. And this list looks the most different than it has in a while. We have movement from 2 all the way down to 5, with our previous 4 and 5 teams both losing this week. 3 and 5 teams both losing this week, as Washington State falls. Louisiana, one of the top Sun Belt teams, also goes down in brutal fashion to South Alabama, all but eliminating the Sun Belt from the college football playoff. The way it stands now, at number 5, we have James Madison. James Madison, a team that has been at the top of these rankings, not quite in the top 5 for a while. They've taken 2 tough losses to Sunbelt teams when they're just not playing like themselves. But when they're on, this is a very talented team. We've seen them take down teams like North Carolina, putting up 70 points. When that offense is on, it's very, very tough to stop them. That offense is not always on, though, so they're here at number 5. At number 4, UNLV, a program that I personally really think is one of the best in the nation, almost in a top 25 spot for me, not quite there. UNLV is a team that I had ranked for a while. They take a loss to Boise State. They're not in the Mountain West playoff, in the Mountain West championship game right now. Right now that goes to Colorado State. They're in a tough spot. I think they're better than Colorado State. And I think a rematch between them and Boise State would be a lot of fun, but it doesn't look like that is about to happen. At number 3, we have Army, one of the last 3 remaining undefeated teams in the entire nation. Oregon, Indiana, and Army are all that stand. Army takes a tough test to Notre Dame coming up soon. That is going to be their playoff game right there. If they get it, if they win that, they probably find a way in. If they lose, Notre Dame stays in. They're done at that point. Tulane at number 2. I talked a lot about Tulane earlier on in the show. I think they're arguably the best group of 5 school in the nation. They've taken 2 tough losses to 2 really good teams. Kansas State, who has been ranked for a while, and Oklahoma, who in the SEC is really failing, but outside the SEC had a really staunch defense. They played both of those close. And at number 1, Boise State. Ashton Genty, Maddox Madsen are leading this team. This is a team that I still think is the best in the group of 5, although their grip on that is starting to slip away with some tight results down the stretch here. But getting into our actual top 25. At number 25, we have LSU. I looked for every possible reason to get LSU out of my top 25. I'm not going to lie to you. I think there are only 22 teams this week that deserve to be ranked. But unfortunately, this is a top 25 list, so we have to keep it going. LSU would have slid into that honorable mention kind of spot because they're still a very good team with some quality wins. They beat an Ole Miss team that's playing maybe the best in the entire nation right now. That holds a lot of weight for me. LSU, a good football team. They're just really slipping right now, and they're at number 25. Another team that I did not want to keep ranked, but I did, is number 24, Kansas State. Kansas State takes another tough loss, and I've been low on Kansas State basically all season. Really, since that Tulane game, I've been very low on Kansas State, but they continue to win most of the time. They take a tough loss this week to a really good Arizona State team. They're still in the playoff race, but again, I don't think this team really deserves to be ranked. 23 goes to Syracuse, a team that I've been high on. They've been sliding in and out of my rankings. They get a big win this week against Cal. They come in as 10-point underdogs, travel cross-country, and show why they're good. This is a team that's kind of inconsistent, but they've gotten a couple tough wins. They got a couple tough losses as well. They're not really a top 25 team, but I do think they're better than Kansas State and LSU right now, so they're ahead of them. Again, I only think 22 teams deserve to be ranked, so this is where we really start. At 22, and the first team that I think should be ranked, it's the Arizona State Sun Devils. The Sun Devils deserve a lot of respect. I personally think I should have ranked them last week, maybe even the week before. Instead, I decided to put Louisville in there, and we all saw how that went this week. Arizona State, dominant. They didn't even need their star running back, Cam Scatterbo, to really go off in this game. Their quarterback held them. Their defense really slowed down that Kansas State offense, and they just dominated when they traveled to Kansas State on the road. A massive victory for them to keep them on pace for a potential Big 12 title. At number 21, we have the Army Black Knights. Army, we've talked a lot about, especially when we just went through that group of five, top five. Army's still an undefeated team. These games, they should breeze through. They've dominated. They get a big test coming up against Notre Dame, and that's going to be for their season. If they're able to get past that, and they win the American Championship against Tulane, this is a team that I think will make the college football playoffs. Iowa State at 20. They get a big bounce-back victory this week after dropping 2 straight games against a Cincinnati squad that's kind of been faltering as of late. They're a good Cincinnati team. They just can't quite get that 6th win. Iowa State shows why they were one of the last undefeated teams. They go out there. They're still in that race for a conference championship, so we'll see what happens as the Big 12 kind of eats itself alive. 19 goes to Clemson, a tough win for them. This was probably their second, maybe even their best win of the season, going up against a Pitt team that, again, like the team just before them in Iowa State, had dropped 2 straight. Now they've dropped 3 straight. They were undefeated before that point. Couple of weird calls. Cade Klubnik comes up huge at the end with a 50-yard run to put him away. He was too close for comfort for this Clemson team that's still alive for an ACC championship. They still need some help to get in with SMU or Miami losing another game. It's not going to be easy for them to get in, but I do think they deserve to be ranked. At 18, we have Tulane. I've talked a lot about Tulane. I will continue to gas up this Tulane team. This is a Tulane team that I think is one of the top 20 in the nation. I think Tulane deserves to get a realistic shot at the playoffs. And like I've been saying all show, I think Tulane and Boise State both making the playoffs is a real possibility, and I think that's something people need to be prepared for. There will be riots in the street. ESPN building might burn down, but I think that's a real possibility with the way that the college football world is going right now. At 17, South Carolina. They are sneakily still alive to make an auto bid. They are, again, I talk about some of the hottest teams in college football right now. Tulane, South Carolina, Ole Miss. They're in that group. South Carolina has 3 losses, but they are playing spoiler. A great win against a Missouri team that was ranked. Again, not a team I thought should be ranked, but was ranked by the playoff committee. That should get them a huge boost. South Carolina getting a lot of respect, playing a great football down the stretch here. They're at number 17 for me. 16 goes to Texas A&M. They get a win against a team they're supposed to beat this week. We're getting to that point in the SEC schedule where they just schedule that random cupcake game. Had a couple of them happen this week. One of them was for Texas A&M. Texas A&M, a team that I still think needs to figure out that quarterback situation. Until then, I'm not fully bought in on them, but they're close. They've still got a shot in that SEC race. 15 is Boise State. They're a team that falls a spot. They almost lose 2 games in a row to Nevada, and then they almost lose to San Jose State. Doesn't matter. They get big wins. Ashton Jeanty continues to play amazing. Almost, you can say almost for a lot of these teams. Oregon almost lost this week. we're not penalizing them too much. Boise State's still the best Group of 5 school, but it's making it close right now between them and Tulane. At 14, we have Tennessee. A tough loss this week in Georgia. I still think they're a good squad. They're on the outside looking in for me, and I'm curious to see how far they fall in the actual playoff list. We'll find out tomorrow. I was lower on Tennessee than a lot of other people. They've only fallen 4 spots for me. I know they were up at number 6 by the AP poll or by the college football playoff poll. I'm curious to see how far they fall. They're out of the playoffs for me, but they're right on that bubble. 13, we've got BYU. The BYU Cougars, a team for me that actually, and we'll see later, is not in the playoffs. They're a team that's kind of been skating by the skin of their teeth. They're kind of like Miami, except without that super high-powered offense. The Cougars lose to a 3-win team. It's not a good look. I love that Kansas squad, but it's a tough thing to explain. They've been kind of trending downwards for a while now, and BYU is a team that I was cautious about for a while. Still not fully bought in. They can still find a way in, but I'm a little cautious about them. 12, we have SMU, our second ACC team in the top 25 here. They're all the way up at 12. They were the first team out the second team out, I should say, based on the college football playoff rankings last week. Curious how they do this week. They skate by with a win. Wasn't the most convincing thing, but still a win's a win. They remain undefeated in ACC play. It all comes down to the college football, to the ACC championship game for them. 11, we have Ole Miss. They were on a bye. I couldn't move them up too much. This is one that I expect people to have a little bit of an issue with because I'm seeing people put Ole Miss as high as number 6 in the country. They've been playing better football than just about anybody. They're coming off a win against Georgia, Georgia coming off a win against Tennessee. Georgia's going to get a lot of love for this win, but I can't move Ole Miss up too much when they're idle this week. They are up 2 spots from last week. I'm going to need to see it one more time. That loss to LSU is really hurting them right now. This is a team that I want to believe in, and I want to believe in this team. I truly do. But their resume, the teams that they've lost to, I just can't quite put them in that top 10, and I can't put them in the top. I can't move them up that high, especially when they didn't play this week. 10 goes to Colorado. This is a team I'm really high on. Travis Hunter, Heisman candidate, most likely winner with the way that the odds are looking right now, as long as he doesn't do anything that'll completely tank his season. This is a really good Buffaloes team, especially defensively. They take care of one of the, again, a tough team that's trying to play spoiler for a bunch of them in Utah. I didn't like the quarterback switchback for Utah, but I guess it kind of worked. They kept it close with Colorado for a while before they ended up faltering down the stretch. This was the best offensive performance for the Buffs since 2016. A huge win for them. They're in my top 10. At number 9, we have Penn State, another team that I personally have been a little lower on than a lot of other people. I'm starting to come around on this team. When they win big, and that is huge. They just play good football against anyone that isn't named Ohio State. So I'm going to start to move them up as long as they keep winning football games. I can't keep punishing them for as long as I have. Number 8 is Alabama. Nothing really, we didn't learn anything this week, right? They played their cupcake game at the end of the season. We'll see what happens down the stretch here, but they played really good. Again, they're expected to, but we didn't learn too much about Alabama. 7 is Miami, another team that was idle this week, coming off of a loss. Miami is a team that, I want to believe in this Miami team. I think this is a good Miami squad. I think Cam Ward is one of the best quarterbacks, if not the best quarterback in the entire nation. So I want to believe in this Miami Hurricane squad, but that defense is going to continue to get him in trouble, especially when Cam Ward can't play Superman every single time. 6 is Notre Dame. Like I said, their season hinges on that Army game coming up soon. That is going to be that's going to be whether or not they make the playoffs. Right now, Notre Dame, I think, pretty solidly in. As long as they win out, they're going to make it. I think they control their own destiny, especially without a playoff game, without a conference championship game. They just need to win out, and then they get in. 5 is Georgia, another team that I expect people to be mad at me for putting this high. But they've beaten Texas, a really good team. And I know Texas has its fair share of haters. They shouldn't be that high, blah, blah, blah. Their one loss this season is to Alabama. They took care of Tennessee. This is a really good Georgia Bulldog squad, and none of the losses that they've taken have been really that bad, honestly. I love this Bulldogs team. They come together when they need to. They're at number 5. 4 is Indiana. Nothing changes there. They were idle. I'm not going to move them up past a Texas team that dominated again this week. I'm not going to move them past anybody that won at the top. Number 3, Texas. Dominant performance. Was a little scary there against Arkansas, but they get the job done. Texas, I know, is going to get some pushback for being number 3. You can talk about, they don't have those wins, but they beat Georgia. That's kind of what it comes down to. I'm big on this Texas Longhorns team. They passed the eye test. They're my number 3 team. I think they're pretty clearly a number 3 team. 2 goes to Ohio State. Again, their 1 win against Penn State is huge. They're pretty clearly a top 2 team in the nation. I don't think I get too much argument about this. And number 1, the Oregon Ducks. I can understand people thinking about moving them down. You can't do that after 1 bad game. All of these teams have had their bad games, their share of scary moments. The Oregon Ducks, they had theirs in Camp Randall, a tough place to play. I'm not worried about this team. Oregon is number 1. They're the best team in college football. They're still undefeated, and as long as they don't lose, they should keep that number 1 spot the rest of the season. But let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of this. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention to Monday Night Football, a massive matchup in the state of Texas as the Houston Texans travel to the Dallas Cowboys to take on a really limped and injured team as they get a little bit healthier. We'll talk about all that and more coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Oh, excuse me. Totally forgot about this. Ignore all that. We need to get into what our college football playoffs look like real quick. I know I said we were going to do that right here. We've made a little graphic here to take a look at what the college football playoffs look like and where they stand as far as my rankings right now. Number 1 team in the nation, number 1 seed, the Oregon Ducks. Number 2, that goes, of course, to the SEC champion right now. That is Texas. Number 3 behind them, that goes to Miami. They're a little further down in the rankings, but they're still the 3rd highest ranked champion. 4, the 4th highest ranked champions, that's the Colorado Buffaloes at number 10. 5, we have Ohio State at number 2. 6, we have Indiana at number 4. 7 seed is Georgia. They're gonna host a playoff game. I know a lot of other rankings don't have them, but they're at number 7 there. Number 8, Alabama is the number 9 seed. They travel to South Bend here to face the. Excuse me. Yeah. No, they would travel to South Bend there to take on Alabama, who is the 8 seed. Who's the 8 seed? No, Notre Dame's the 8 seed. Alabama is the 9 seed. I apologize. Penn State's the 10 seed. Ole Miss at 11. They're that 4th SEC team, and Boise State is that final champion at number 12. But let me know what you think of these playoffs. Like I said, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention to Monday Night Football. Monday Night Football, a massive matchup in the state of Texas. We'll talk about all that and more coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, November 18th. If you're just tuning in, we just went over the top 25 rankings, took a look at the playoff picture, and did our group of 5 top 5. A lot in that last segment. In this segment, we turn our attention back to the NFL. Monday Night Football tonight with the Battle of Texas as the Houston Texans take on the Dallas Cowboys in Arlington, Texas. Cooper Rush versus CJ Stroud. We'll talk about that matchup in just a second. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, November 18th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into our fifth and final segment here, Monday Night Football. Tonight, we have the Cowboys taking on the Texans. CJ Stroud finally gets Nico Collins back, and it's just in time. They were really struggling with some injuries. Tank Dell, as good as he is, not a wide receiver one. Much better fit for him as a wide receiver two. With Nico Collins in, that offense was humming in the first half of the season. You have a team in the Texans that's really struggled. They've lost 2 straight brutal games where they led at halftime, led big last week against Detroit. This is also their 3rd straight prime time matchup. CJ Stroud needs to step up huge, have a big game against a Cowboys team that just about everything that could have gone wrong this season has. They've suffered injuries to almost all of their biggest players. Dak out for the rest of the season. They should get Micah Parsons back, but that's probably too little too late. They're really struggling offensively, defensively. We saw a little bit of Cooper Rush last week against the Eagles. That did not go well. This is going to be a very interesting game to see what direction the Cowboys go in. They still have Trey Lance back there. He's a guy that they've decided not going to be the starter for now. When you're going through all of the issues that the Cowboys are, especially when you have an owner that refuses, owner/GM in Jerry Jones, that refuses to admit that anything's wrong, it's only going to make the problem worse, right? You have a big game, the Houston Texans traveling to Dallas to take on your team, the Battle of Texas. This only happens once every 4 years, and this is one of the first times in a while where there's some expectations with both of those teams. Obviously, the Cowboys always have their expectations. The Houston Texans don't usually have the expectations with them, but now with a young quarterback in CJ Stroud after winning a playoff game last year, they've got those expectations. Both of these teams are dealing with a lot of injuries, right? The Texans, especially offensively, are dealing with a lot, but that defense, the secondary especially, I think is really good. They have a team that had 5 interceptions last week, all super tough play interceptions, maybe not. Yet a Hail Mary, 2 tip passes, so maybe 2 real interceptions, but still against a Detroit team that, as we saw, can roll just about anybody, putting a 50 bomb up last night against the Jaguars. What are you going to do against that? The Texans slowed them down. The real question is, what are they going to do in the second half? Because the Texans have come out quickly in the first half, and they've done a really, really good job. They have been dominant in the first halves of these games. Against the Jets, they went into halftime with the lead, proceeded to give Aaron Rodgers and the Jets their first win since they fired their head coach. They're 1-5 now, in case you were wondering, since they fired their head coach. They had the Lions on the ropes, 3 interceptions in the first half. They were up by 3 scores. They end up losing on a walk-off kick. This is a team that couldn't get anything going in the second half in either of those games. And I'm not trying to point the finger at coaching like a lot of other people have, because I think Bobby Slowick, his offense, and that coaching staff have done a really, really good job, right? This is a team that just has an identity, and when it doesn't work, they're a little scared to adjust. And that's the issue with this team. In the NFL, you need to be able to adjust. The Cowboys are a team that hasn't been very good against the run, which is what the Texans want to be good at. They want to run the football. If you can run the football against the Cowboys, like most of these teams have, they should dominate this game. You also get Nico Collins back, which obviously is the biggest X factor at receiver. You now have to, spread out a little bit. You can't just Tank Dell more of a slot receiver. You can't just, have your slot guy and then crowd the box a little bit. It makes it a lot easier to run the ball when you have a guy like Nico Collins, big, fast, strong, physical, like him, that can go out, stretch the field. For CJ Stroud, he gets his number one target back, and that should help a lot. The Texans defense, they just need to play good against Cooper Rush, who's been not that great all season long, I guess, in his limited amount of starts, but a Cowboys offense that's really struggled all season long. Houston's favored by 7 on the road here. I think they should get the win. This is not going to be a just walk-in game. It's prime time. It's kind of a rivalry game, Battle of Texas for Texas supremacy. We will see, though. I have Houston coming in and getting a big win. It's not going to be as huge as a lot of people think it's going to be, but I do think that Houston will come in to Jerry World, get out with a massive win. They win 26-14. But let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of this game, anything else we talked about earlier on in the show. Let me know what you think in the comments. But thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in to today's episode of Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I have been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. We'll be back tomorrow going over NFL power rankings, NFL winners and losers, and anything else that's going on around the world of sports. Thank you for tuning in. See you same time, same place tomorrow. You all have a good one. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn.